Hello, I'm Sven DeYoung with Bethany Volunteer Fire Department. What you're about to view is an auto extrication demonstration that took place during the week of alcohol awareness on Bethany College's campus. The Bethany Volunteer Fire Department typically runs about 180 calls per year, of which approximately 130 are related to the EMS service. The purpose of this demonstration was twofold. First, to show the ill effects of drinking and driving and their dire consequences. And secondly, to show the types of resources that the Bethany Volunteer Fire Department and surrounding communities have in dealing with such a situation. The scenario that will be presented to you is that two cars were involved in an accident. Furthermore, an unlucky pedestrian was caught in the middle. As oftentimes is the case, someone who is in the wrong place at the wrong time is the one who winds up dead. It's also important to note here that this extrication was done in what is known as real time. From the time we were notified of the accident to the final time when the final extrication was done, and the last person was STAT MedEvac to Pittsburgh. It's also important to thank West Liberty Volunteer Fire Department, McKinleyville Volunteer Fire Department, Brooke County Ambulance Service, and the Sheriff's Department from Brooke County. Without utilizing all our resources, the outcomes of patient care could drastically change. The accident has just occurred. What you saw here is how the Bethany Volunteer Fire Department normally gets toned out by Brooke County. What takes place is that they tell us the nature of the emergencies and our pagers get set off. After that point is when the low band or the siren that you hear in town always is set. Normally the siren blows for 3 minutes, and that gives us an approximate time for us to get out the door. It takes us an average of approximately 3 minutes to get at least 2 vehicles on the road. This is something that is important for people to understand during response time. As we discussed earlier, you can see the incident and how it is set up here. We have one person trapped between a vehicle, and we will have 2 people in the other vehicle, which is not visible at this point. This is what is referred to as a signal 6A, signal 6B, means with injuries and fatalities. Normally on an automobile accident, when it comes in as one of this type of nature, we respond everything we have. Of course, the ambulance and rescue truck are the first 2 vehicles out for obvious reasons. As you can see here, Bethany PD will come to the scene first normally if they're in town because of their response time. The other vehicles that will respond out during this time would be both engines. The reason we respond, both engines are basically because of the fact that we need extra manpower in case there is fire, of course, to suppress the fire that would be taking place in the vehicles. We were just told by the county that it's a vehicle accident with injuries and fatalities. The original call came in as a minor signal 6, which meant basically a fender bender. Once Bethany PD got on scene, they informed us of what really was taking place. And normally this is the way that it would take place. The ambulance would be followed by the rescue truck to respond out for the scenes. It takes us an average of about 3 minutes to get out the door. As you can see now, we're about 3 minutes into this scenario, 3.5 minutes into the scenario now. We're going to be discussing the golden hour later, but it's important to keep in mind the time factors. As you can hear there, West Liberty was requested to respond out. We do a lot of mutual aid work with West Liberty Volunteer Fire Department. With 3 patients, we're going to need extra EMS assistance. Furthermore, with entrapment, we're going to need their jaws of life to extricate the people from the vehicles. You have a front view now from the ambulance coming up Ross, turning onto Pendleton Street. The first vehicles are arriving on scene now. Approximately 5 minutes and 30 seconds have elapsed since the county had notified us of the incident. Another important factor to keep in mind, although we have been notified 5 minutes and 30 seconds ago, this accident may very well have taken place before that. It's realistic to believe that if an accident like this were taking place on campus, we'd be notified pretty much immediately, but were to take place on some of the back roads such as Campground Road or some of the other areas, it may very well be 10 or 15 minutes before someone even calls 911 to report the accident. And that's something that's very important to keep in mind during the golden hour. Currently, as you see here, we have 3 patients. We have 2 EMTs that have come out, Ryan Hoffman, as he's a rescue lieutenant, as well as Carl Clark, better known as Cookie, who's also a rescue lieutenant. As you'll see, they're checking that patient now. They're determining that patient is a DOA, dead on arrival. We currently have 2 other patients in the vehicle. If one triages, which is known to basically take care of the people that are on the scene, with the limited resources that we had on the initial response, then with 2 EMTs, it's a responsibility to try to save the lives of those that you can first. In other words, the one that seems to be dead on the scene will not be worked with. That's the person that will be dealt with last. The 2 people that are alive are the ones that will receive the aid. Chances are, if that someone has suffered cardiac arrest or something of that nature during a trauma, chances of them living are very slim. Therefore, we focus our attention on the individuals that are alive. Currently, you'll see a member of the fire department that went in and held stabilization. That's for the purpose to make sure that while they are stabilizing the car on the outside, make sure that the neck does not move and no more spinal cord injury takes place. They're right now stabilizing the car. As you can see, they're putting 4x4s, and later you'll see stacked 2x4s go underneath the car. The reason that is done, it'll be placed underneath the frame of the car. After that point, the tires would be deflated, and the car would actually be sitting on the 4x4s and other blocks of wood used. That is to make the car secure during the extrication process and to make sure the car does not rock around much. That's for both patient and rescuer safety. See that we also brought one of the engines on campus, as I had mentioned earlier. This is done basically for 3 reasons. 1, for extra manpower. 2 for fire suppression in case something should happen with gasoline that's spilled and the vehicle should catch on fire. And during this time of the evening, we need it for lighting because we know it's going to get dark into the extrication process. Currently we're using what is called a glass master. What that basically does is allow us to cut through the windshield to gain access to the patients. We cut the windshields out, and after that point you'll see how the other parts of the extrication take place. These are all hand tools that are currently being used. When the jaws of life come out, those are hydraulic tools. You always cover up the patient with a blanket or something of that nature to protect them, to protect their faces. And rescuers are always there assuring them of what is going on, what is being done, and assuring them that they are going to be attended to. On an incident like this, you always have an incident commander. In our case, it was C.E. Schwartzfager, the chief of Bethany Volunteer Fire Department. The chief and assistant chief can always be recognized for they wear the white helmets. Regular firefighters will have black helmets on, and line officers will be wearing red helmets. The chief had just advised the county of the situation, of how many patients we had and currently what aid we were rendering them. You can hear now in the background West Liberty Volunteer Fire Department coming up the hill. That's West Liberty Volunteer Fire Department's Rescue 4-8 with the jaws of life. We are now 10 minutes and 25 seconds into the scene. The minutes from the golden hour are slowly but surely ticking away. Furthermore, they've responded another ambulance for the patients. Their 4-5 has responded. We now have 2 ambulances on scene. As you can see, a line has been pulled in case something should happen with the car, in case there's any fuel spillage, in case that should ignite to protect the rescuers. They continue to stabilize the car before the extrication process to take place to once again ensure the safety of both the rescuers and of the patients. Members from both departments frequently go to rescue classes to be updated on the latest rescue techniques and proper protocols for rescue. As you can see, everyone is wearing protective gear that is around the vehicles. Everyone has a helmet on. The people that will be doing extrication will have their shields down or will be wearing goggles for their own protection. To become an EMT, it takes approximately 140 hours worth of class time. And then extrication classes can be anything from a simple extrication class lasting about 10 hours to a much more advanced one being up to about a 60-hour class. Currently we have medics from West Liberty that responded. As you could see, they opened up the drug bags to go ahead and start IVs and to help stabilize the patient. Looks like there are a lot of personnel on the scene, and there are, being that there are 2 vehicles involved as well as 3 patients. Patient care is of the utmost importance. And then, of course, the extrication process. Currently, they're discussing how they should get the individual who is pinned between the 2 vehicles separated from that vehicle without endangering the rescuers as well as the other two patients that remain in the other car. In cases of prolonged extrication, we also have the ability to contact the Ohio Valley Medical Center, MSTAR in Wheeling, and request that their MOT team respond out. What that basically is are emergency room physicians that can provide extra assistance on scene to help stabilize the patient and to help in the ultimate outcome of the patient. As you can see now, the rear windshield of this vehicle has been removed. They are currently beginning to use the jaws of life. The jaws of life basically consist of two types of instruments, ones that spread and ones that cut. Currently they're trying to use the spreaders to open up the door. Later we'll see them using the cutters to chop the roof off of the vehicle. They've now been able to gain access to the door. They will be removing the door itself now. The reason extrication is done on scenes of this nature is so that we can remove the individual from the car in a much safer manner for both the patient and once again for the rescuers, but more so we don't move the patient around a lot, causing any further injuries to take place during the rescue process. The idea is to free up as much as we can and to move the patient out of the vehicle without having to try to squeeze them through doors or anything of that nature. In the background you could hear other tones being set. Where that was, the McKinleyville Volunteer Fire Department was toned out for assistance to set up a landing zone for us for STAT MedEvac, a chopper service that we use in extreme incidences like this to fly people out to Pittsburgh for more advanced care. As you can see now, the spreaders are being used, and what it'll literally do is pop the door off of the hinge and help us gain access to the vehicle and once again to the patients. We're now approximately 17 minutes into this incident from the time that the county has toned us out. Recall that West Liberty responded to the scene about 10 minutes into it, so they've been on the scene for about 7 minutes and have begun the extrication process. We'll have had a door removed by that point, and we'll begin then cutting the roof off. During such an incident, it is the responsibility of the incident commander to constantly keep the county informed as to what is happening and to advise them if we need any additional resources or any additional manpower on the scene. The incident commander, in this case the chief of Bethany Volunteer Fire Department, informs the county of the extrication process, when it has begun, and how far along we are. Furthermore, he is the one who requests that STAT MedEvac be contacted so that we may fly out a critical patient. As you can see, as this patient was removed from the vehicle, stabilization of the head was still taking place. That was to make sure that if any spinal injuries had taken place, that we stabilize that and do not worsen that. They have a laceration to the forehead, and also we saw a bone sticking through the forearm. Lacerations to the forehead are quite common in motor vehicle accidents, especially if the drivers were not restrained. They hit their head on the windshield and basically put in what is known as a spider web. When an incident like this takes place, we have to be concerned about many things: head trauma, chest trauma, if they were not fastened in the seatbelt, if the steering wheel hit the chest. Internal bleeding is a concern. So there are a number of factors that you have to take into account when treating this patient. The philosophy behind the golden hour, to elaborate on that a little bit more, is that once the incident has occurred, you have approximately 1 hour to get the patient to the hospital. That does not mean once we have been notified of the incident, but rather once the accident has taken place. If it takes 10 minutes to notify us that the accident had taken place, that means that we only have 50 minutes at that point to get to the patient, get them out of the vehicle, and get them to an emergency room or to an operating room to help ensure their survival. The chances of survival fall dramatically after that 1 hour period. If you do have prolonged extrication, or if the patient gets to the hospital about an hour and a half into the process, the chances of their survival, if they do have life-threatening injuries, is diminished greatly. That's why it's so important for us to work within that golden hour time period. One of the luxuries that we do not have, being out in the area that we are, is a hospital that is close to us. It takes us approximately half an hour, 20 minutes to half an hour, to get to any of the local hospitals from our area. Unlike the city of Wheeling that can be to a hospital within 3 to 5 minutes, we have a really prolonged time to reach a hospital. Because of that, the time out the door and the time that we spend on scene, we need to reduce that to guarantee or to ensure we can get the individuals to the hospital within that golden hour. As you can see here, they have a number of rescuers around the vehicle. They've begun to cut the top off of the vehicle so that we can gain better access to the vehicle and remove the last patient that is trapped on the passenger side of the vehicle. For that patient, we have contacted STAT MedEvac, who will be landing on campus to fly the patient out. We do have an arrangement established for STAT MedEvac that we have 8 pre-designated landing zones in our territory, so that if we do need their help, we can notify them of which landing zone they should land at, and we can, in a much faster manner, get the landing zone established, as well as bring the patient to the landing zone and have the helicopter land, and then once be medevaced to one of the regional hospitals. Oftentimes with an accident like this, they would be flown or medevaced to the University of Pitt Medical Center and be put under the care of Dr. Peitzman as the head of trauma at the University of Pitt Medical Center. As you can see, they're cutting through the vehicle at this time. It is a slow process and one that certainly takes some coordination, some skill to do. You are, after all, cutting through metal. The larger the vehicles are, the heavier they are, the older they are, the more difficult it is to do. It's much easier to cut through a Ford Escort than it is through a Crown Victoria, for example. The county has just notified us that they contacted STAT MedEvac and they have an ETA of 9 minutes. STAT MedEvac 1 out of the Washington County base site. It takes them approximately 9 minutes to reach the Bethany area. STAT MedEvac currently has 6 locations where they fly choppers out of, as well as 2 fixed-winged aircraft. Even coming out of an area such as Cranberry, their ETA to our destination should be between 11 to 13 minutes from there. But out of the Washington base site, it's a 9-minute ETA, and they certainly are the closest service available for anyone in the area to use. As you can see there, also the 2 individuals in blue, they are from Brooke County Ambulance Service. They were brought on the scene also as additional EMS help and an additional ambulance to transport the patient. The DOA would be transported by ambulance without lights and siren for the fact that they are dead, but they would be transported to a local medical facility where the coroner could pronounce the cause of death. The roof is now being lifted off the vehicle. We are now fully able to get to the patient and able in a much safer way to remove the patient from the vehicle. The county would be notified that the extrication has been completed, and just for a point of reference, it has taken 14 minutes to remove both doors and to cut the roof off of the car to remove this patient. We are now 24 minutes into the process. The patient is now being fully stabilized, being worked on by both EMT as well as a paramedic. EMT Ryan Hoffman and paramedic Bob Fowler from West Liberty Volunteer Fire Department. Also do have medic Mike Gallo, who used to be a member of Bethany Volunteer Fire Department and now runs with the Brooke County Ambulance Service. They're assessing the patient now. Apparently it appears that her legs are trapped underneath the dashboard. This is also something one commonly finds in an automobile accident. At that point we have to do something which is called roll the dashboard, which you basically take a ram bar and push from the bottom of the remaining post from the door into the dashboard and to go ahead and roll that away. The rescuers have determined that they're going to want to use the ram to go ahead and extricate this patient fully. The helicopter has not arrived on scene yet, so there is no big rush to get the patient out. We are still waiting for them to arrive. Because of that, we'll use the time to make sure the full extrication process is done in a safer manner for the patient. Even though there are a lot of people on the scene, everyone knows what their primary objective is on the scene. If it's going to be fire suppression, the people standing there by the hose line, if it's patient care, or if it is extrication, or for that matter, communications and incident command. Everyone is assigned a role as they come to the scene as to what their job is to do. You can see firefighters with their breathing apparatus on. This is for when the helicopter lands, to make sure that we have a line pooled for that helicopter in the unfortunate event that that helicopter should suffer any type of accident during the landing process. Currently now they are setting up the IVs in this patient to give them fluid resuscitation. Basically this will help allow us to administer drugs to the patient, and after this point being involved in this accident when it is cold, it will help to try to combat shock. As you can see, they're now putting the airbags between the vehicles, try to push the two vehicles apart to get the one individual, the DOA, who has been entrapped between the two vehicles, removed from them. We are now half an hour into this exercise. We're in the process of removing the final trauma patient and removing the DOA between the vehicles. The DOA, for all intents and purposes, would be our last concern due to the fact that they are dead. The concern was and still is the two living patients. One is currently en route to the hospital already, and the other one is awaiting the helicopter to land. As you can see now, they're getting ready to move that patient out of the vehicle onto what is called a long board or a full backboard. At that point, that patient will be strapped in as the other patient was that we had seen earlier to once again ensure that the person's body is stable and no more injuries occur to the spinal cord if any injuries had taken place to that. As you can see, a fairly nice-sized crowd had gathered for this. The purpose of this, of course, was to let the people know the effects of drinking and driving, and not just to show them the types of tools that we have available and what we're able to do, but hopefully to drive a point home to these individuals, the consequences of drinking and driving. The unfortunate thing is that this is something that we do here as a mock drill. But the reality is this is something that EMS providers do around the country every single day. And sometimes it's the friends that you pull out from the vehicles and not just people you don't know. As you can see, they're slowly moving the patient out now on the longboard onto the cot where she will be strapped down. At that point, the cot will be raised up and we'll be standing by waiting for the helicopter to land. We are now 32 minutes into this process. 22 minutes since the rescue tools had arrived. See the two individuals from Brooke County Ambulance Service leaving. They actually received real emergency during this incident and had to leave to go and attend to that. The person is now securely strapped to the cot so that when we move the person around the area and roll them away, that they do not suffer any more injuries or, for that matter, fall off the cot. One can now see the importance of why we bring the fire trucks onto these types of scenes, is also to provide the extra lighting. This extrication process has taken a fair amount of time, 35 minutes to this point, as we had suspected it would. For that reason, that is why we bring the trucks onto the scene, to once again light up the scene so that we can better see what we are doing, provide safety for us and safety for the patients that we were working with. As you can see, the patient is fully what we call packaged at this point, is literally ready to go ahead and be put into the chopper. Everything has been done, the IVs have been established, an airway has been established, the patient is fully immobilized and just waiting. All the victims that were used during this incident were all members of the Bethany Volunteer Fire Department or Fire and Rescue Club for this demonstration. As you can see there, STAT MedEvac is doing its initial circling. We'll see them circle approximately 5 times before they do their final approach. But STAT MedEvac does do a flyby to kind of check over the scene and see where everything is at. You can hear in the background now 4-6, which is engine 4-6 from West Liberty, and 2-6, engine 2-6 from Bethany, have charged their lines, which means now that water has been given to the individuals who will be standing out and overseeing where the chopper lands in case anything should take place. Their lines are fully charged and available to flow water. This is a precaution that is to be taken at all landing zones. Always supposed to have a line puller and an individual standing by to put out a fire in case something should happen during the landing process. Once again, we can see STAT MedEvac circling. They'll continue to do so for approximately 5 to 7 minutes before they land in this situation. The landing zone that we used on campus would not be one that would be regularly used in an incident. It was used for the purposes of this mock drill, but normally they require 70 by 70 or 100 by 100 area clearing for them to land. Some of the areas that we have in our town include the practice soccer fields, the field house, as well as some out by Castleman's, as well as one out by the county line and then down by Route 67, and finally on McAdoo Ridge. We did give STAT a kind of a tight squeeze here for this purpose, to lane in front of Richardson, but they were able to do so. We're now 38 minutes into the process. At this point is when we would really like to have the patient be airborne if we were to fly them out, because they will arrive to the trauma center where they're being flown to before that golden hour has elapsed. As you can see, once again, there's STAT MedEvac circling. We unfortunately were having some communication problems with STAT MedEvac. They had an improper frequency programmed into their radios, and for that reason, in the beginning, we were unable to communicate with them, and they weren't able to identify our landing zone. This is something that's important for us to discover during training situations such as this versus on a regular call. The problem has now been rectified, and we've been assured that won't happen again. For now, we're punching to their computers, and anytime they come out into our area, they just need to punch up a number. All radio frequencies will be programmed automatically now into their computers, and it won't take place. But that's one of the very large benefits of doing something of this nature, not just to educate the public, but for our purposes, to find out if anything does go wrong, where the areas of concerns were, and how we can go ahead and rectify them. And this ended up being a large area of concern, being unable to communicate with a helicopter in the initial ongoings of this landing process. Once the helicopter lands, they are going to go ahead and be doing what we call a hot load. What that basically is that the helicopter will not shut down, the blades will keep spinning, we load the patient in, we get the patient off the ground, and we get them going to their trauma center. If they were to shut down the engines, by the time they restarted and got the chopper back up to speed, you lose approximately 3 to 4 minutes. And in times like this is when minutes are critical. We continue to have communication problems with STAT MedEvac. We'd advise them to switch over to another frequency that is commonly used, 155.340. Unfortunately, unable to reach them on that frequency also. We're now currently 41.5 minutes into this process. Had the communication problems not occurred, STAT MedEvac would have been on the ground by this point and just about been airborne. The other patient that was taken out should have reached the hospital by now, Ohio Valley M-Star Hospital that I spoke of earlier, which also provides the MOT service. It has an excellent trauma facility, and that is where we transport the majority of our traumas to. They have an excellent facility and excellent doctors on staff to treat and to deal with any type of trauma situations. Here, STAT MedEvac now has located the landing zone, as you saw, two Bethany PDs, Rich Arthurs, who's also Second Assistant Chief with Windsor Heights Fire Department, as well as Larry Palmer, who is a member of Wellsburg Volunteer Fire Department. We're both also assisting us during this. They both work for the county as deputy sheriffs, as well as Bethany PD, and both volunteer for fire departments. One of the reasons this was also done was to show the people of our community what types of services we have available in case we would need them. The chopper service, the MOT team, of course the police, and the local mutual aid agreements that we have between the outlying fire departments to go ahead and render service when is needed. This shows, I think, the types of services that we're able to provide and shows them where their tax dollars are being used for. I think it's important to also state here that all members are volunteers that do this. They do give their time, much of it in the classroom as well as out on the scene to do this, and do not receive any pay for it, but just receive the gratification for being involved in this type of system. As you can see now, STAT MedEvac is circling, doing its final approach. They are still looking for the landing zone. They do have their searchlight out. They have located the landing zone at this point. One of the difficulties of landing at night, if the LZ is not lit up extremely bright, it's difficult for them to notice where it is. With all the lights that were on campus, it certainly presented a problem also. As you can see, it's hovering over Harlan now and going to make its final approach between the trees and land. That is a BK. They have a number of choppers that they fly. A BK, such as that, is a smaller one. The other one, their larger one that they have in their fleet, is called a Dolphin. It's what some may know as a Airwolf helicopter, which flies now out of Clarion County, STAT MedEvac 6. This is out of STAT MedEvac 1. It's overseen by the Center for Emergency Medicine, which is a conglomeration of a number of the hospitals in Pittsburgh: University of Pitt Medical Center, St. Francis, Presbyterian, as well as a number of other hospitals in the region. Currently, as you see, we're going to begin what is called the hot load process. The blades are still spinning. We're going to get ready to go ahead and move our patient and load our patient into the aircraft. The incident commander is informing the county that the chopper has landed safely and successfully. At this point, the two lines that have been pulled are still being manned in case anything should happen. As you can see, the patients are loaded and unloaded from the rear of the chopper. One must always approach the chopper, though, when loading a patient from the front of the chopper, so the pilot is able to see the patient, or see the rescuers coming on, and direct them where to go. We are now 46 minutes into the process. Once again, a little longer than what we'd like to be. But with the communication problems, it easily added on 6 minutes to this process. Some of that time can certainly be made up in the air versus the ground transport. Currently he's talking to the flight nurse as well as the flight medic to explain to them the situation that we have, explain to them the condition of the patient, what has been done, the full immobilization, that an airway had been established, that IV had been established, to explain to them the mechanism of injury, that it was a two-vehicle MVA with one DOA, and now will be transported onto their cot into the back of the chopper. There are certain protocols when one calls a helicopter such as STAT MedEvac onto the scene. One of them is if you have an MVA, motor vehicle accident, with a fatality, and then you have other patients who are traumas, recommendation is that they should be flown out if you are far away from a hospital due to the fact that one has already lost their life on that accident. And the chances are that the other ones are sustaining life-threatening injuries. Other things such as falling more than 15 feet, it's a good example, or being hit by a car traveling more than 20 miles per hour. The patient is currently being strapped into the cot or onto the cot, and then will be transported. That's paramedic Ed Wolf with West Liberty Volunteer Fire Department. They typically only allow 2 rescuers to approach the craft besides the personnel from STAT MedEvac for safety purposes. We do have to establish a perimeter where no personnel are allowed inside of, once again for safety purposes and for the safety of the crew, as well for the safety of our rescuers and ultimately for the patient's safety. We're now approximately 49 minutes into the process since the initial tone out, since we were initially notified of the situation. And certainly are approaching that golden hour that we try to stay within. Our rescuers are now returning from the aircraft. The aircraft will be on the ground for a minute, do a few communications things with their communication center, and then we'll get ready for takeoff. STAT MedEvac would now be contacting their communications center, advising them of the patient's condition, where they will be flying this patient to. As I said, the likelihood it would be University of Pitt Medical Center to their trauma facility. And they will be advising them of their ETA. It will take approximately, from here, 10 to 14 minutes, 15 minutes possibly, to fly them to University of Pitt Medical Center. That'll put us right at the golden hour. In practice, we would really like to be able to stay under that golden hour and give ourselves 10 to 20 minutes leeway and have the patient in the ER or the OR with 20 to 30 minutes to spare. Unfortunately, because of communication problems that we had, we will just be making the time within that golden hour parameter. As you can see now, STAT MedEvac is lifting off the ground, and they'll be transporting this patient to the trauma center where they can go ahead and get an increased level of care. "52 minutes has elapsed. It's important to remember what we just viewed was a demonstration. But the reality is, this type of accident takes place every day, oftentimes with dire consequences. Once again, I'd like to thank West Liberty Volunteer Fire Department, McKinleyville Volunteer Fire Department, the Brooke County Ambulance Service, and the Sheriff's Department. But most of all, I think we all owe a special appreciation to all those volunteers who give of themselves and of their time to help us in the time of our need. Thank you for joining us